Have I got good news for you? We have found aliens. NASA recently announced that it has found signs of life on Mars. Apparently, aliens are right under our noses. I wonder what they look like. Are they little green men? Or are they the Greys? They could even be red since Mars is red. I'm not even getting into black and white. Don't be racist. I don't want to crush your hopes. Well, I do this quite often, but the reality of the news is not like that. As you might expect, as always, the press took the story, twisted it, distorted it, exaggerated it, and presented it to you in an entirely different way. Unfortunately, no. They didn't discover little green men, or the Greys, or whatever those strange creatures are anymore. But they did obtain very solid evidence that there was once life on Mars. This evidence is so compelling that we are 99.999% sure that there was simple life on Mars at some point. I can't say 100% because to do that, we would need to somehow bring those samples back to Earth and examine them. Today, I will tell you the real story behind this news. What did NASA discover on Mars, and what does it mean? And if there was truly life on Mars once, what happened that it didn't continue? Since the topic is already open, I will also talk about why Mars failed. Why did Mars not succeed when Earth did? Why couldn't its brother Mars be successful? Anyway, let's get back to our news without dragging it out too much. Recently, an important announcement came from NASA. The announcement included the following. Perseverance found very important evidence of life. So what was that evidence? As you know, NASA has sent many rovers to Mars so far. The most active one currently is Perseverance, which was sent in 2020. Perseverance landed on the surface of Mars in February 2021. You might remember those days because Perseverance had a guest. More precisely, a companion it was carrying. Ingenuity, the first flying device sent to Mars, the first helicopter. At that time, I also made videos related to Ingenuity. You can find them on the channel. Ingenuity has now reached the end of its journey. It completed its mission, but Perseverance has been operating for 3.5 years, and so far, it has obtained many valuable pieces of information about Mars. But one of Perseverance's most important missions was to search for signs of life on Mars. In the past 3.5 years, Perseverance has obtained many important pieces of evidence about life on Mars. But to obtain the most important evidence, it needed to be sent somewhere. The surrounding gullies are considered ancient riverbeds. That's why NASA sent Perseverance to this region. Because if this was once a riverbed, and there were some living organisms in this riverbed, there should definitely be some organic residues in this area. That's why our rover has been conducting research in this region for a long time. During its surveys, it discovered a conglomerate rock about 60 to 90 centimeters in size in the area. And on the surface of this rock, there were very strange shapes. These shapes resembled the spots on a leopard's back. This spotted rock was indeed a very important piece of evidence, because we also find such spotted structures in ancient riverbeds on Earth. These small spotted structures are very, very solid evidence that there were once living organisms there. Because similar spots are also created by certain types of microbial bacteria on Earth. These microorganisms perform some chemical reactions while producing energy, or rather while digesting, and as a result of these reactions, such spots form on the rocks or surfaces they are on. These lines made of iron and phosphate, or rather these traces, could have been important evidence that an organic organism was performing digestion there. This evidence excited NASA. If the surrounding gullies were once regions with flowing water, and the place where the rock was found was an ancient riverbed, then it's possible that some microbes and bacteria were living here. And these microbes and bacteria might have left such traces while producing energy. Of course, there are also those who object to this, those who have counter-arguments. According to their claims, the reason for the formation of these shapes is that hot lava was cooled by water. This is something we observe on Earth. Sometimes when hot lava cools suddenly with water, such traces can appear. But the evidence that the region being studied is an ancient riverbed is much, much more dominant than the evidence that it is a lava bed. So even if there is a small counter possibility that there was once a river here and microorganisms lived in this river and naturally left their traces here. But to be fully certain, because scientists say it is 99.9% likely, we can't say anything definitively without obtaining and examining those pieces of evidence. Of course, Perseverance collected some samples from the region, but obtaining these samples is somewhat problematic. Normally, samples from the Perseverance mission can be sent to the outer layers of the atmosphere. The main module carrying the rover has a mechanism that can send such samples to the outer layers of Mars's atmosphere. But here's the problem. The carrier capsule sent to Mars's orbit needs to catch something and bring it back to Earth. Technically, it's not impossible, but there is a serious cost problem. The cost to bring back these very valuable pieces of evidence from Perseverance is approximately $25 billion. And NASA's budget isn't sufficient for this. Also, the U.S. Congress doesn't want to allocate additional budget for this. So unless there is a last-minute development, unless NASA is given extra budget, or unless Elon Musk says, "I'll do it," reaching these samples will take many years. Most likely, if we manage to send humans to Mars in the 2030s, the first colonists there will be able to reach these samples. In other words, those who designed the rover and those involved in the program might not receive a Nobel Prize. In summary, we don't have 100% concrete evidence, but we're 99% sure. There was once life on Mars. There were microorganisms in the riverbeds, and as they lived, they left traces in their environment. But what happened? Why did Mars fail? I've made a few videos on this topic before. You can find them on the channel. But since the topic is already open, let me briefly mention it. According to scientists, Mars and Earth began life together. They went through some hardships in between. As you know, another massive planet collided with Earth. Earth broke apart, reassembled. What remains is the Moon, etc. I have a video explaining these topics called Theia. I'll post its link here. You can watch it from there. But at the end of all this process, life began to sprout slowly on both planets. However, at the end of this painful process, life began to sprout slowly on both planets. Asteroids brought millions of tons of water from outer space to the surfaces of these planets. And about 4 billion years ago, the conditions on Mars and Earth were almost the same. Both planets had water. Both planets had strong magnetic fields, but while Earth managed to preserve its magnetic field in water, Mars couldn't do so. As you know, Earth has a strong magnetic field. We call this the magnetosphere. Our magnetosphere protects us from the sun's deadly particle winds, but unfortunately, we can't say the same for Mars. Yes, about 4 billion years ago, Mars had a polar and strong magnetosphere, just like Earth. But today, very little remains of that magnetosphere. There are still some magnetic fields in certain regions on its surface, but overall, the entire planet is vulnerable to the sun's deadly radiation. Today, we know why Mars died, because it lost its magnetosphere. But how did this happen? For a planet to have a strong magnetic field, its core must function like a dynamo. It needs to have a hot, fluid, metallic core. It must also have a solid metallic inner core. All of these are present on Earth. That's why our Earth has a strong magnetic field. But somehow, Mars's mechanism malfunctioned. According to one theory, because Mars's mass and size are less than Earth's, Mars couldn't retain its internal heat. Its interior began to cool, and its core, which should remain fluid, solidified. As a result, the core died or slowed down. This caused Mars's magnetic field to decrease significantly. With the decrease in the magnetic field, Mars became vulnerable to the sun's deadly radiation and particle winds. Also, due to its already weak atmosphere from its mass, the atmosphere was shattered, vaporized, and lost due to the sun. First, it lost its atmosphere, then the liquid water on the surface vaporized and disappeared. The planet began to cool rapidly, and the remaining water became ice. Years of wind and erosion buried that ice under sand. Thus, Mars transformed into a red desert planet. Naturally, the newly emerging life also ended before it could progress too far. According to another claim, the amount of water on Mars reached a much higher level than it should have. The water seeping into the crust excessively increased the hydrogen content inside. This caused the core part to solidify and the core to stop. And this caused the scenario I just described to occur. Besides these, there is a third theory. According to this theory, 4 billion years ago, a massive asteroid hit Mars. This impact disrupted Mars's technological structure. It caused the formation of abnormally large volcanoes like Olympus Mons. The impact disrupted Mars's core, causing it to stop. The lava erupting to the surface erased the traces of the impact. We don't know exactly which one is correct, but one of these three or a similar scenario ended life on Mars 3.54 billion years ago. That's why when we go to Mars, we don't expect to see little green men or their fossils. If one day we go to Mars, we're highly unlikely to see any living advanced beings. We won't even encounter fossils of advanced beings. There's a very high probability that complex organic beings never existed on Mars. According to most experts, at most, we might see some primitive, soft-bodied organisms on Mars, similar to what we see on Earth billions of years ago. But according to the majority, life on Mars never reached a complex stage. So, what kind of scenario will we encounter? Most likely, we will go to Mars within the next 20 years. Even if NASA doesn't, Elon Musk will do it. When the first colonists go there and start digging around, they might find some molecules hidden in the rocks or perhaps in the ice beneath the soil. Or better yet, they might discover some microscopic organisms. According to many experts, yes, there are Martians on Mars, but they're not complex beings walking on two legs like us. They might be similar to bacteria on Earth. We don't expect more complex species due to the catastrophe they experienced. But our not expecting them doesn't mean they don't exist. Maybe our calculations are wrong. Perhaps life has managed to hold on somewhere. Despite radiation, despite the lack of a magnetic field, despite the incredibly harsh climate conditions, perhaps there are advanced life forms somewhere. Some of them might have even survived to the present day. But as I said, be hopeful but don't expect too much. However, no matter what, if we find even a simple bacterium there, it would be a tremendous piece of evidence that life is not unique to Earth. If bacteria are living on Mars, who knows what and where else might be living? Maybe there is an advanced civilization around Alpha Centauri. Maybe someone over at Sirius is discovering fireworms. Or maybe our world is just a television show watched by super civilizations. The universe is so vast, so enormous that everything you can think of has the possibility of being true. But to know which is right and which is wrong, we need to go there. If you liked this video, you can find this and many similar videos on my channel. See you in the next video. Take care. Goodbye.